Long ago, in the remote village of Ukutar, nestled deep within a dense ancient forest, a woman named Abena carried a child. Her belly was round and heavy, but unlike other pregnant women, her child never kicked or turned. The villagers whispered in hushed tones, their voices laced with fear and suspicion. "Her baby sleeps too much," they said. "Something is wrong." But Abena refused to listen. "My child is special," she would murmur, her hands cradling her belly as she sang soft lullabies each night, hoping to awaken the life within her. The villagers' whispers grew louder as the months passed. They spoke of omens and curses, of children born with the mark of the spirits. Abena ignored them, her heart steadfast. She had always been different from the others in Ukuta, a woman of quiet strength and unshakable faith. She believed her child was a gift, not a curse. But as her belly grew heavier, so did the unease in the village. The elders began to avoid her, and the children were forbidden from playing near her hut. Even the animals seemed to sense something amiss. Dogs howled at night, and birds fell silent when she passed. The forest itself seemed to watch her, its ancient trees leaning closer as if listening for the child's first cry. One stormy night, as lightning split the sky and thunder roared like a wild beast, Abena felt a sharp, searing pain in her stomach. The midwife was called, and the women of the village gathered around her, their faces tense with anticipation. Rain lashed against the walls of the hut as Abena pushed and screamed, her body trembling with effort. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fear. When the midwife pulled the child from her womb, the room fell into a deathly silence. There was no baby. Instead, the midwife held a small polished wooden coffin in her hands. The villagers gasped, their eyes wide with terror. "A coffin!" an old woman shrieked. "What evil is this?" The midwife, her hands shaking, placed the coffin on the ground. It was intricately carved with strange symbols, and its surface gleamed as if alive. Abena, weak and drenched in sweat, stared at the coffin in disbelief. "Where is my child?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, the coffin began to shake. A faint scratching sound came from within, and the lid creaked open inch by inch. The villagers backed away, their faces pale with fear. From the coffin emerged a baby, pale as moonlight, with eyes as black as the deepest night. He did not cry or smile. He simply stared, his gaze piercing and unnerving. Abena's heart raced as she reached for him, but the child did not move toward her. Instead, he lifted a tiny hand and pointed at the midwife. The woman gasped, her body stiffening as if turned to stone. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed to the ground, lifeless. The villagers screamed and fled, their cries echoing through the storm. But Abena stayed, her maternal instinct overpowering her fear. She reached for the child, her hands trembling. "My baby," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The child looked at her, his expression unreadable, and then he spoke, a single word that sent chills down her spine. "Mama." The days that followed were filled with terror. The child, whom Abena named Kofi, was no ordinary baby. Strange things happened wherever he went. Frost spread across the ground when he crawled, and fires erupted without warning. The villagers begged Abena to leave, their fear turning to anger. "He is cursed," as they cried. "He will bring death to us all." The village chief, an old man with a long white beard, declared that Kofi could not stay. "He is not of this world," the chief said, his voice trembling. "He must be taken far from here, or we will all perish." Heartbroken but determined, Abena fled into the forest with her son. The villagers sealed the gates behind her, their relief palpable. But as Abena wandered deeper into the woods, she realized that the darkness within Kofi was growing stronger. The coffin, which she had left behind in the village, reappeared one night, floating beside her as if guided by an unseen force. Inside the coffin, a thick black mist swirled, forming the shape of a tall, shadowy figure with hollow eyes. "I am the keeper of the forgotten," the figure whispered, its voice echoing like a distant wind. "And this child is my heir." Abena's heart sank. "He is my son," she said fiercely, clutching Kofi to her chest. The keeper laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "He was never meant for your world. He belongs to the in-between, a realm of shadows and lost souls." The forest around them seemed to come alive, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes, their branches reaching out like clawed hands. The keeper extended a shadowy arm toward Kofi. "Give him to me," he commanded, "or watch as he destroys everything you love." Abena's mind raced. She could feel the darkness within Kofi, a power that threatened to consume him and her. But she also saw the flicker of light in his eyes, a spark of humanity that refused to be extinguished. "I will not let you take him," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. The keeper's form flickered and the coffin began to shake violently. The lid snapped open, releasing tendrils of black mist that coiled around Abena and Kofi. The air grew colder and the shadows closed in. But just as the darkness seemed ready to swallow them whole, Kofi lifted his tiny hand. A burst of golden light erupted from his fingertips, shattering the coffin and forcing the keeper back. The keeper's hollow eyes widened in shock. "Impossible," he whispered before vanishing into the shadows. For a time, Abena and Kofi found peace. They settled in a distant village far from Ukuta, where no one knew of their past. Kofi grew into a kind and gentle boy, though Abena could still sense the darkness within him. On quiet nights, she would see shadows flickering at the edges of the forest, watching and waiting. Years passed and Kofi became a man. But one day, he came to Abena with a solemn expression. "Mama," he said, "I must go. There is something calling me, a place I need to find." Abena's heart ached, but she knew this day would come. She kissed his forehead and watched as he walked into the forest, disappearing into the mist. She knew he would return, for he was no longer a child of darkness. He was something greater, a bridge between worlds, born of love and light. As the sun set, Abena stood at the edge of the forest, her heart both heavy and light. She had defied fate, proven that love could conquer even the deepest darkness. And though the shadows still lingered, she knew they would never claim her son. Far away, Kofi walked deeper into the unknown, his steps guided by a force he could not yet understand. The forest grew darker, the trees taller and more twisted. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. He could hear whispers in the wind, voices calling his name. "Kofi," they murmured. "Come home." He pressed on, his heart steady. He had always known he was different, that there was something inside him that set him apart. But he also knew he was more than the darkness. He was his mother's son, and her love had given him strength. As he walked, the shadows began to take shape. Figures emerged from the darkness, their forms flickering like candle flames. They were the lost souls, the forgotten ones, who had been trapped in the in-between for centuries. They reached out to him, their eyes hollow and pleading. "Help us," they whispered. "Free us." Kofi felt a surge of power within him, the same golden light that had saved him and his mother all those years ago. He raised his hands and the light burst forth, illuminating the forest. The shadows recoiled, their forms dissolving into the mist. At the heart of the forest, Kofi found a clearing. In the center stood a massive tree, its branches twisted and gnarled. At its base was a door, carved with the same symbols that had adorned the coffin. He knew this was the gateway to the in-between, the realm of the Keeper of the Forgotten. As he approached the door, the Keeper appeared before him, his form flickering like a dying flame. "You have returned," the Keeper said, his voice filled with both anger and relief. "You belong here, Kofi. This is your destiny." Kofi shook his head. "I am not yours," he said. "I am my mother's son, and I choose my own path." The keeper's form trembled, and the ground beneath them began to crack. "You cannot escape your fate," he hissed. "The in-between will always call to you." Kofi closed his eyes and focused on the light within him. He thought of his mother, of her love and strength. The golden light grew brighter, enveloping him and the keeper. The keeper let out a final anguished cry before dissolving into the shadows. The door to the in-between shattered, and the lost souls were freed, their forms rising into the sky like wisps of smoke. The forest grew quiet, the darkness lifting for the first time in centuries. Kofi returned to the village, his heart lighter than it had ever been. He found his mother waiting for him, her eyes filled with tears of joy. "You are free," she whispered, embracing him. And for the first time, Kofi truly believed it. He had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, not through power but through love. The shadows still lingered at the edges of the forest, but they no longer held any sway over him. As the years passed, Kofi became a protector of the village, a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of the forgotten. He was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always light. And though the echoes of the coffin's lid slamming shut could still be heard on quiet nights, Abena smiled, for she knew the truth. Love is stronger than darkness, and her son would always find his way home. The shadows still watch, their whispers carried on the wind. Some say the keeper of the forgotten still waits, biding his time. And in the heart of the forest, where the trees grow tall and silent, the echoes of a coffin's lid slamming shut can still be heard. But Abena smiles, for she knows the truth. Love is stronger than darkness, and her son will always find his way home.